there's that kind of societal expectation that everyone's sitting around a big cozy fire together with their family and friends. And that's really just not the reality for all of us.
Hello there, this is Bradley, and you're listening to Psych Everywhere. The holidays are supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. But what if they're not? Today, let's talk about practical tips to handle 5 common holiday struggles. It's practically guaranteed that you or someone close to you faces at least one of these struggles. Stick around for ideas to thrive this holiday season. This episode was made possible by CSPP Alliant International University. If you'd like to learn about graduate programs at CSPP, see the link in the show notes. Joining us today to help guide us through the holidays is Dr. Naomi Tabak of UC Irvine, a clinical psychologist with experience treating adults with anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and major mental illness. Last year, Dr. Tabak spoke on the UCI podcast about navigating holiday stress, and I loved that episode, and so I was really eager to have her on the show today so we could dig into 5 common holiday challenges. Dr. Tabak, welcome to Psych Everywhere.
Thank you, Bradley.
So I guess we'll jump right into the first of the 5. So what if, let's say, my family struggles to get along during the holidays due to politics or possibly past traumas?
So let's, get right into it with the tough questions. So, as you referenced in your intro, the holidays can be a time of joy and happiness for many people, but it can also be really challenging to get together with family, especially in light of some of the political struggles that we're all facing right now. And so I think it's really realistic to be thinking about this and to be asking this question. So when it comes to thinking about really any interpersonal situation, but particularly family dynamics, I like to rely pretty heavily on Marsha Linehan's DBT skills. And one of the things that Marsha Linehan writes about is crisis survival. So when she talks about crisis, she's talking about like these short-term acute stressors, right? And the idea here is how can we get through these situations without making them worse? And I love this because I think we can all think of like 1,000 ways that we could make a situation worse with our family members, right? We can react the wrong way. We can storm off. We can kind of poke someone into saying something they'll regret later on. And that's really the one thing that we want to avoid, not thinking necessarily what's my ideal holiday time, but how can I get through this without making it worse if I know it's going to be a difficult time? And so that kind of leads into what I think is kind of our greatest tool for crisis survival, which is coping ahead. This is another thing that Marsha Linehan writes about a lot. Here I'm talking about thinking ahead and anticipating what kinds of topics or conflicts might arise so that you can be prepared to respond to them. So you may not know kind of exactly what issues will arise, but if you know who's going to be there, you know what the situation is kind of going to be like, then you probably have some pretty good guesses about what might come up. So one way to think about this is kind of like studying for a test, right? You don't know exactly how the questions will be asked or how difficult it will be, but if you've been paying attention in class, you probably have a good idea of what's going to be covered on the test, and that's what you're going to study, right? So we can apply the same thing to difficult family situations. If you know that every year your uncle makes some rude comment about your identity or what you're going to do with your college degree after graduation, you can think ahead about how you want to respond, maybe even prepare a couple responses so you're not reacting out of emotion in that moment. So coping ahead, I think, is one of our greatest tools for making it through these difficult family dynamics without making it worse.
So let's go on to the second of the 5, which is what if I've lost a loved one?
Yeah, so this is such a personal question, I think. I think people like to honor lost loved ones in different ways based on their family traditions and their cultural backgrounds. So I want to be careful here not to give kind of overly generic advice. But that's, kind of what it makes me think of is like, what are the ways that you and your family can acknowledge the loss in a way that honors the loved one and feels meaningful to you? And that's going to look really different for different families. I think if it's a recent loss in particular, one thing I would just emphasize is that this holiday season will probably feel really different from past holidays, and that's okay. I think it's okay to step back from the expectation of joy and celebration if there is a recent loss. And don't feel like you need to buy into that whole thing. You can kind of do your own thing and meet yourself where you're at this holiday season.
And what if I'm alone for the holidays?
Yeah, great question. So this one I think about kind of similarly. There's a lot of reasons that people may be alone for the holidays. And again, I think what's difficult about this is that there's that kind of societal expectation that everyone's sitting around a big cozy fire together with their family and friends and that's really just not the reality for all of us. So here I would think about, what do the holidays really mean to you? Like, why is this time of year special or not special? Like, maybe it's just a time of year that you're catching up on laundry or working because you have a service job or you work in a hospital and people rely on you, right? Whatever it is, I would suggest finding ways to lean in to whatever matters to you during this time of year. I mean, this is just general advice, really, but I think that during this time of year, it can be like especially heightened when there's this expectation of what the holidays look like. And so the good news here is that there's no right answer, right? You can make yourself a nice meal or go for a walk or kind of reflect on your goals and why your job matters. Maybe work on a project you've been putting off. There are so many ways you can think about the holidays that don't fit into these kind of generic boxes of what a quote unquote typical or normal holiday season might look like.
This episode was made possible through a Psychi sponsorship with the Alliant International University California School of Professional Psychology. That's CSPP. Founded in 1969, CSPP was one of the nation's first independent schools of professional psychology. Today, CSPP continues its commitment to preparing the next generation of mental health professionals and advocates. Their dedication to ensuring every community's access to quality mental health care extends from integrated care to inclusive family therapy. Explore their programs at https://info.alliant.edu/partner-psychi. And of course, I'll put a link in the show notes too. So let's talk about stress. Let's say I'm hosting for the holidays, or maybe I'm traveling for the holidays, and there's all this unpredictability that goes with that. Do you have any advice for that?
Totally. Yeah. So take care of yourself is my big advice. So yeah, like either of those stressful situations, whether you're hosting people in your own home or hosting a big meal or you're traveling, one thing that's consistent about that is inconsistency. Our regular schedules are thrown off. We might be going to bed later. We might be eating different kinds of foods, maybe not exercising regularly. So the big thing here is to take care of yourself. And I mean like the basics, like pay attention to your sleep, eat regular meals, exercise if that's part of your life, or maybe just move your body in ways that feel good to you. Because those basic things are the foundation of our mental health. And when they get thrown off, it's so much easier to have big emotions and become reactive, right? So the simple things, brush your teeth, go to sleep, pay attention to what your body needs over the holidays.
So the last of the five, and I've heard psych majors talk about this one before, where they weren't sure what to do with their psychology degree, and they knew that their family, we're going to be asking them all about it. Or maybe it's an alumni member and they're in between jobs and they don't know what they're going to be doing next. And again, they know that family is going to be asking them all about it. Do you have any advice for them on how to navigate?
Yeah, completely. I think that I can so relate to that. I think I still have anxiety dreams about that kind of scenario. And this is another place I think where preparation or coping ahead can really be your best friend. So for a lot of families, this question is 100% going to come up and not just once, right? Every family member and every family friend can ask, "What are you going to do after college?" or "How's your job?" And sometimes I think this comes from a place of like pressure or anxiety on behalf of like parents that want their kids to launch and go off and figure out their careers. Um, but sometimes it's really just that people don't know what else to talk about in these big family gatherings and they just kind of fall back on these like generic topics, right? Um, so one of the things I would ask myself in that scenario is like, again, thinking ahead, like, what kind of emotion is likely to come up for me when I'm asked this question? Am I going to be irritated? Am I going to be anxious? Am I going to be pressured? Like, what do I anticipate my emotional reaction might be so that I can be prepared to handle that in the moment? And then I would just consider using a prepared answer. Maybe think about one or two ways that you would want to respond to that, whether it's telling people you're still figuring it out or you're excited about what's next or giving them a little bit of detail about what it is you're doing or working on or thinking about. And then again, to quote Marsha Linehan, just be a broken record. Just say the same thing. You don't have to come up with 100 different answers or unique ways of having the same conversation. Just stick to those one or two. Don't have to divulge everything about where you're at in your life or what's going on or what you're figuring out. And then if people are really persistent, you can always change the subject.
You talked about preparing answers ahead of time if you know something might be a problem, but every now and then something surprises us and a situation gets really highly tense. Do you have any tips to de escalate a moment like that?
I think that's where it can be really helpful to like take a breath and like pay attention to what just happened and think about how to respond. You don't need to respond automatically out of emotion right in that moment, right? So check in with yourself before responding to that, whatever it is, the question that's being asked or the rude comment that your uncle made or whatever comes up. I know I'm picking on uncles. I have wonderful uncles. I'm sure many of you do too. It's just an example. um, but I think that's the thing. It's like stop, take a breath, and then respond.
You mentioned that there are a lot of different ways to honor a lost loved one. Could you name any examples for that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think again, some of this may come from people's like religious or spiritual or cultural backgrounds, but it may be something like looking through old photos together as a family or setting a place at the table for the family member to include them in some way. Or maybe just sharing some memories together so that it feels like you're not forgetting the family member. I think that's what some people uh, may be afraid of in these kinds of situations, that they'll feel they're not being included in some way. Or the opposite, that if I talk about them, I won't be able to handle it. I'll get too upset and I won't be able to handle it. So these rituals or ways of honoring the family member can be one way to kind of like toe the middle line there, acknowledging without kind of diving deep into a deep emotional experience.
I know a lot of families have to travel to a bunch of different places, and not all of them are even places that they want to go to, but they've been invited there. They feel like they have to say they want to go there. Um, is it okay to say no sometimes and set boundaries?
For sure. I mean, I
I would
think,
think so.
yeah,
Any tips for doing that?
I think what I think about with boundaries is like what matters to me in this scenario. In other words, like, why am I saying no? If I'm saying no, I think that can help us guide that decision. If it's because I really want to avoid a difficult situation, that's something that we may or may not decide to attend. Like there may be times where we don't want to avoid something difficult, where we want to go show up in whatever way we can, have those conversations, and get through it without making it worse, right? Because we want to sustain a long term relationship with the people that we're visiting, for example, right? Then there may be other times where it's perfectly okay to say no. Maybe you're not feeling well, right? And you've been traveling all week and, there's just too much going on and that's going to put you in a bad place. In that situation, I would really think about how I want to communicate the no to my family members or friends or loved ones.
One more question. Do you have any simple things that people could do, maybe practices or habits, to maintain their mental health during the holiday season?
Yeah. Um, I love this question. I think the first thing I would suggest is do what you already know works. When we're in stressful situations, it's not the time to start new habits, right? So it's not the time to start exercising if you've never done that before, or learn a new skill if you don't have the time to do that. But if you have some coping strategies or kind of mental health tools that you're already using, it's just the time to maybe like turn the dial up on those. Most of us know from our past experience what works when we're feeling stressed out. And I think this is really a time to rely on those things.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. It's such a timely subject. I know it's a busy time of year and it's difficult to make time to do something like this, but I think it's really helpful to people. You've given just wonderful answers on everything that I've asked. And honestly, it's kind of a heavy subject, right? And I'm happy that like I'm ending this, and I don't know about you, but I feel hopeful. I feel like there was a lot of concrete advice and steps forward on how to make things better and make the most of your time. And I'm just looking forward to the holiday season more than ever, to be honest.
Well, that's nice to hear. And I guess kind of leaning into that for just a minute, like I know we talked a lot about like difficult parts of the
Uh-huh.
holidays, but I also hope that people find some joy this time of year. And whether it's like, the big celebratory joy or just these kind of small moments of togetherness or reflection or quietness. Sometimes the holidays can just be quiet and that can feel really nice too. So yeah, thank you for ending on that note because we talked a lot about the difficult stuff.
Well, thank you so much. You've just listened to another episode of Psych Everywhere, a podcast by Psychi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. For this show, distinguished guests weigh in on applying psychological science to a diverse range of current events and to better your life. Listen for free wherever you go for podcasts or see a written transcript on YouTube. If you haven't already subscribed to Psych Everywhere, go ahead and follow us wherever you go for podcasts. Tell a friend or a colleague about the show. Word of mouth is a huge help. So share what you learned at the dinner table or in your classes. You could also follow us on X at Psychi Podcast and leave a review at Apple Podcasts. You'll absolutely make my day. And more importantly, you'll be helping us to get Psych everywhere. Copyright 2025, Psychi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. All rights reserved.